This might just be a 0% balance transfer credit card offer that is too good to miss. There is no fee for the transfer, and it looks quite an attractive deal if you're trying to get rid of your debt. But of course, there's some small print and fine details that you do need to pay attention to, so I'm going to go through those for you in this video. Because, let's face it, most people don't read the terms and conditions. But because I'm a lawyer, I do read the terms and conditions, and sometimes it's my job to read the terms and conditions. So first of all, if you're new to me, I'm Daniel Shensmith, a barrister of England and Wales. I run the Black Belt Barrister channel talking about law, and here I'm talking about money. So just because I'm a barrister and a qualified mortgage advisor doesn't make this video legal or financial advice, and you would be urged to seek those independently if you wanted to rely on it. This video is for guidance on what I think about this deal, and of course going through the small print so you don't have to. So what is this deal and who is it from? Well, it's a Santander credit card. It's called the Everyday No Balance Transfer Fee Credit Card. I feel like there should be a comma in there somewhere. This is how it's sold to you. Enjoy 0% interest on balance transfers for 12 months with our credit card. Looking for a bit of breathing space on your existing credit card balance, so don't want to pay extra fees? Our Everyday No Balance Transfer Fee Credit Card might be what you're looking for. With no fee to transfer your balance and 0% interest on balance transfers for 12 months, our card is ideal for those wanting to keep costs low. You see, that's important because many people look at a 0% credit card thinking that that is the best way of shifting around your debt. And it may be whilst you're trying to eliminate that debt, and it might be a good idea, but many of them have got quite high fees. So if you move it every year and there's a fee of 3 or 4% every time you do it, then it's still 3 or 4% that you're paying on the balance of the card that you transfer, regardless of it being quote unquote 0%. This one, however, bar for the small print, which I'll come back to in a moment, has no fee attached. So from the date of opening the account, you'll get 0% on balance transfers for 12 months, no fee to transfer a balance for the first 12 months, and 0% interest on purchases for just 3 months. So I don't recommend any of these cards, in fact, for purchases. I recommend doing whatever you can to get rid of debt rather than adding more debt onto it. So take that bit with a pinch of salt if you're trying to eliminate debt, which is the best way of building wealth. Eliminating, just to repeat that for emphasis, eliminating debt is your best way of building wealth. So, important to know, no monthly account fee, because many of these accounts do have fees attached. They hold all sorts of fees, which is what you need to look at. A bit like when you're looking at investment accounts. The biggest thing that stings you is the fees attached to those accounts. There are other guides that I will do about doing all of that yourself to avoid all of those fees, and I'll talk about those in other videos. So please make sure you subscribe if you want to hear those investment videos as well. You can apply if you're 18 and over, live in the UK permanently, have an income of at least £10,500 a year, and you don't have another everyday credit card with Santander, obviously. And of course, they're all subject to status and credit checks, etc. Obviously, the headline rate is 23.9% here, and the purchase rate is the same, which is variable. So if that's not obvious, that means it can go up or down, and typically up. Sometimes they go down. Assumed credit limit. So this is assuming a nominal transfer of about £1,200, but a monthly fee of £0. And there's a nice little calculator here and all sorts of other information here. However, in this video, as I said, I'm going to go through the terms and conditions with you. So taking a look, first of all, at the key facts document here, which all financial products are required to have, the pre-contractual explanations and pre-contract credit information that is required is all in this document here. Of course, setting out, first of all, the eligibility, UK resident 18 and over, £10,500 income before tax, and importantly, you do need to have a good credit record for this one and not being declared bankrupt, or a CCJ, that's a county court judgment, or an IVA, an individual voluntary arrangement with your creditors within the last 6 years. They'll do a credit check as part of the application, and if you're the main card holder on a Santander credit card called this, then you can't apply. So it's essentially new customers only. There's a full summary of all of those rates that I've just discussed here. There's no introductory rate for cash transactions, which is not surprising because cash to cash transactions very rarely are an attractive thing for banks to do. So they will always charge you a fee for those. Much like if you're withdrawing cash from a credit card in the machine, it's going to charge you a fee in almost every single case that I've ever seen. Of course, interest charged daily, minimum payments. This is going to be the minimum of either £5 or any interest, monthly fees, default fees charged to the account. These fees I'll come back to in a moment. 1% of the remaining balance on the statement plus the amount of any arrears which are payable immediately. So those are going to be the minimum payments. The minimum that you can have is £500. And as I said, there's no monthly fee, which is important here because many of these cases do. But there are also other default fees that you can be hit with here as well. Late payment fees of those minimum monthlies of £12, which can add up if you start to miss those on a regular basis. Over the limit fee of another £12, and of course the foreign usage to watch out for there with non-sterling transaction fees, etc. 2.95% of the transaction, and of course cash fees, 3% of any amount of cash transaction with a minimum of £3. But now let's look at some of the terms and conditions. So whilst I do think this is quite an attractive card if you're trying to shift a balance cheaply while you pay it off, that is the only time I will ever say that this could be a good thing for you, is if you're trying to eliminate that debt and you want to move it somewhere to cap the charges and the interest while you pay it off. So I will never, in fact, recommend that anybody take out any kind of credit card unless it's part of your overall get rid of your debt strategy. So get rid of your debt strategy, this could be an attractive way of doing it. But as I say, there are terms and conditions, and some of them are quite important. Many of them are included just for legal reasons, but it is obviously stacked in the bank's favour. So importantly, jumping straight to one of the points here, can we change the terms of this agreement? It might surprise you, as I've discussed on other platforms recently, that many of these companies can and do make changes to the terms and conditions within the small print. And obviously they can change the credit limit in future. They can either tell you if there's a higher limit available if you've been actively repaying. Obviously on a path towards building wealth, I don't recommend that you take the higher credit limit unless, as I say, you're using it for the very narrow purpose of moving a debt here to be a cheaper way of having it there to repay it over a period of time. Otherwise, a higher credit limit is just going to tempt you into buying that thing that you can only buy if you've got this credit available. If you don't have the cash to buy something, don't buy it. It is really as simple as that. You should ideally be eliminating all of your debt before you go and buy the pretty nice things that you want. But back to the terms. We can also lower your credit limit. Now that's important because if a situation arises where the bank deems you to be a higher risk than you were at the outset, they may lower your credit limit. Back to that in a moment. You can also contact them to talk about your credit limit as well. But what other changes can they make? This is an important one here, again, because a lot of people don't realize, and this is why these cards cannot be a set and forget situation. You cannot simply take out the card, move the money there, that's it, think no more of it, make your minimum payments and nothing more. Because if the bank has a drastic strategy revision, they may add fees to this account. Now, it may be unfair if they, let's say, go from what it is now to significant fees on the account. That might amount to something which is unfair. And if it's unfair, it's unenforceable. And you could either go to the financial ombudsman or you could potentially claim against the bank, depending on what the fees change to. Notwithstanding, they can, in the terms and conditions, which you will agree to, make changes to the fees. So it says here, we can make changes to fees and charges, including removing or adding new fees and charges and any other terms of this agreement for the following reasons. To reflect an actual or reasonably expected change in our funding costs. This is the amount we have to pay to borrow the money we lend to you, because for those of you that are not aware, banks will borrow money in order to lend it to you, and with wholesale being what it is, they can borrow it at a much lower rate than you borrow it for. So they are borrowing it wholesale and they lend it to you retail. So you are paying a retail repayment interest rate, albeit this is 0%, but just bear with me for a moment. So banks will borrow money at a certain rate, which is lower than what you can borrow it for because you're just one individual. The bank is borrowing lots of money. So without getting too much into the economics of the thing, that's broadly how it works. So that's what they're referring to here. So the change in the funding costs this is the amount that the bank has to pay to borrow the money that they lend to you. For example, and this is the one that most people are familiar with, a result of the change of the Bank of England base rate. Because there's the Bank of England base rate and then the interbank offered rates of money between banks and so on. But more about that perhaps in another video. Or to take account of a change or a change that they reasonably expect in law, regulation, industry code or guidance. And so this could be anything to do with ombudsman decisions, court decisions, regulatory or other bodies that impose regulations or make decisions. And for example, this might be a single decision that impacts a lot of the bank's customers, and then they might need to make changes to all of their accounts so that they can prepare for what might happen as a result of that court decision, by way of example. Further, they can add or change fees to the account based on simply how they do business, the costs involved in business. So for example, if rates were to go up, if electricity and everything else were to go up, if minimum wage were to go up, the whole banking industry costs as a whole, which is not really anything to do with you, if they all go up, then the cost of doing business has gone up, then they may need to add fees to reflect the overall costs of doing business. And this might include anything to do with new technology. In addition, it might also be to reflect a change or a change that they reasonably expect is going to affect them if it's reasonable for them to pass on the impact of that change to you. So that could include any of the above, any of the changes or any of the costs of doing business, any such costs, maybe even regulatory and compliance costs if all of those things go up and they can reasonably pass on those costs as a thin layer to each and every one of their customers. They may do that as well. Furthermore, they can make changes to fees and charges, including removing or adding charges because of the risk of lending to you as an individual. So if you suddenly, let's say you suddenly default on another loan or a mortgage, or you get a CCJ or some other major change to your credit file, which they will have access to by virtue of lending to you and having an active account with you, if you suddenly become a much higher risk of lending for the bank, then the terms and conditions mean that they may add charges or even fees in addition to lowering your credit limit on the account and things like that. Or depending on the way that you use the account and whether you break the terms of the agreement. So for example, if it became clear to the bank that you were using it in a way other than intended or some way that they don't like or in breach of the terms and conditions herein, they may make changes such as adding fees and charges. If, however, they are going to make said changes, they will give you at least 30 days notice, and it will be within 30 days of them making the change if it benefits you, and it will be 30 days notice of making any change, obviously, if it's going to be a fee that you will incur. So that will then obviously give you the opportunity, if you decide against paying those additional fees, you've got 30 days notice. And then if you don't want to accept those changes, then you can end the agreement without any charge or penalty. But if you do that, the change will apply until the agreement ends. Of course, all of the other usual warnings about these kind of cards, when they can limit your use of the account if there's any suspicion that you're using it for fraud, or someone is using it without your permission, or there's any concerns over the security of your account and so on. This is commonly just known as freezing or blocking your card. Of course, it is in your interest that they are in a position to do that, because that is the way that they can limit fraud on your account. Jumping back to another section, which is relatively important here as well. If you are in what's referred to as persistent debt, then the bank makes clear to you that they will monitor your payments and look over an 18-month period. If your payments aren't paying off as much of the amount of the transactions added to the account as they are in interest, fees and charges, then you're in persistent debt. In other words, you're not paying enough towards the account to foreseeably pay off that debt. That's known as persistent debt, debt that will stick around, which is a bad thing because you'll be consistently paying interest on money that you're never going to pay back. And so they say if this continues over the next 18 months, they might require that you make additional payments or they might take some other action. And depending on your circumstances, they might even suspend your account or your card until you've paid the outstanding balance. And additional payments will be on top of the minimum payment. And if you don't make those additional payments or broken the terms of the agreements, they might suspend the card again. So that's another thing to watch out for. However, if you're happy with all of those, then there's a section here, how you make that balance transfer. You can make it to pay off an amount that you owe another lender. If you're doing this, you should continue to make payments due to the other lender, both before and after the balance transfer has been made. Now, this is important because if you bear in mind the terms and conditions that I've just been through, if there's a significant change to you as a credit risk, and you've made this transfer on the basis that you were a reasonable risk to begin with, and then you decide, perhaps just mistakenly and innocently, you decide not to make any further payments to your old lender, and they insist that there's a payment outstanding. If you stand firm and you say that, no, I've moved my debt, I'm not paying you, then they might report it then as a missed payment. And they might even go on to report it as a default. And a default can be for any amount. It might be a stupidly small amount of money, but they might register it as a default. If they do that, then Santander, according to their terms and conditions, will pick that up and it'll be a change to you as a credit risk, and their terms and conditions will allow them to then terminate your account. So what might go from being a very good idea to shift one quite bad debt balance with a high interest rate to this 0% for 12 months while you try to pay it off, if you stand firm and stubborn and refuse to make that payment, it could totally destroy your credit report, and then Santander might bail on you as well, because they might say, well, now your risk has significantly changed. Therefore, we require you to repay the balance and close your account. And then you'll be stuck because you'll have a screwed credit report and you won't be able to transfer it anywhere else. So if you don't then find the money, then they might come after you. They might even sell the debt onto a debt collection agency, who then might end up taking you to court. So what might start out as a very positive thing might spiral and end up very bad for you. This is one thing that very often happens when people switch energy suppliers, because they stop paying the old supplier when they believe that the new one has been engaged, because they've paid some money to the new one and therefore refuse to pay any to the old one. And actually, I've been instructed as a barrister on more than a few of these cases, and I'm yet to find one where the old energy supplier was wrong. Every case that I've looked at, we've lined up all of the dates precisely so that the old supplier was correct in that they continue to supply the property, whether it be a residential or a business property. I've dealt with one such business property that was many tens of thousands of pounds in electricity debt to the old supplier because they refused to accept that they were supplying the property up to a certain point. So make sure you do keep those payments. It's better, remember, whether you agree with it or not, it's better that you pay it and then argue about getting the money back so that it doesn't ruin your credit report than it is to refuse to pay it, ruin your credit report, and then try to undo all of that afterwards. Because if you were right, you might then be able to repair your credit report afterwards. But if you are wrong, there's no chance. Another similar situation to that I have had just recently is with a hire purchase agreement with a balloon payment. And there was a big dispute and they refused to pay the balloon payment. Actually, they were advised negligently, in my view, to not pay the balloon payment. Albeit having rejected the goods, their obligation to pay it ended. But as the system and reality would have it, that's my way of looking at things. System and reality. System is the way things are supposed to work. Reality is the way they really work. And so the way they really work is, although your obligation to make a payment might have ended, if you don't make that payment, they might refer it as a missed payment and then a default against you. And then you have to go and resolve it all, which is possible in some situations, such as that one there. Not paying the balloon payment would be possible to rectify, but it's an after the event thing. Your credit report has been ruined in the meantime. So in fact, it would be better to pay it. And in most cases, it would be better to pay it and then argue about it, get it back and so on. Because if you validly rejected something in the meantime, then you shouldn't have had to pay it. So if you can prove that point, you'll get the money back. but you won't go through the hassle of having your credit report ruined. Just like this, moving one debt from one company to another, if you don't make the payment to the old lender and they report it as a missed payment or default, then it's obviously going to ruin your credit report. So make sure you stay warned of all those things. I will link this card in the description below. Just remember, this is not a financial recommendation. It's not financial advice, and it's certainly not legal advice. It is just a guide and something that I've found that if you are looking to pay off your debt on your journey to build wealth, this looks to me like a genuine good deal to shift some expensive debt to get rid of it. So it's the Santander everyday no balance transfer fee credit card. So as it suggests, 0% for 12 months and there's no fee to transfer. But bear in mind those terms and conditions that I've been through. Make sure you do look at those. Make sure you don't fall foul of those and end up in a worse position than when you started. I hope that's been useful. If it is, please do bop that like button and subscribe. I'm looking to grow this channel and talk very much more about money, one of my favorite subjects. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.